Good morning. This is Kimberly Gonzalez. I am an application engineer with Progression Technologies, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We're going to take a look at sheet metal and some of the more common issues that we get tech support calls for. Now, we get a lot of calls for issues with the drawings, the flat patterns not showing up. In the view that's supposed to be showing the flat pattern, all of a sudden it starts showing the formed or the bent part. What happens with this is when a user is in the drawing and they use the right mouse button and then the open part icon to go back to the model, usually the users are unaware that this will always activate the flat pattern configuration in the model. And being unaware of this, they see that the model has been flattened and they'll suppress or use the flat pattern tool to bring it back to the formed part. So what happens here is when they're in the drawing and they come in here and they put in a flat pattern. They want to get back to the model. They right mouse button and open part. It takes them back to the model. They're not aware that it's taken them to the flat pattern and they're wondering why things are flattened. If you pay attention to the configuration name up here, you'll notice that you are in the flattened state. And then also if you go over to the configurations, you'll see that the flattened state is the active configuration. So what is happening is people are not aware of this and they'll come over here to their flat pattern folder and they will suppress or go to sheet metal and select on the flatten tool to bring it back to the formed state. So in essence, you no longer have a flat pattern configuration. They're both bent. Okay, so be careful with that, because if we do that, the view in the drawing will no longer be flattened. Now another thing we get calls for are bend lines are not showing. The main thing for this is that the sketches are turned off. Okay, whether they go to the view menu options or in the heads-up view toolbar, they have toggled off the visibility of the sketches. Also, the feature settings itself, rather than the document settings, the feature settings themselves may be turned off. So if you notice here, we have two bend lines. So if I were to come up to the heads-up view toolbar and I were to toggle off the view sketches, the visibility of the sketches, then the bend lines would disappear. That is also found up here in the view menu under sketches. I can toggle it there as well. So those are the document settings. Now at the feature settings, if I come over here in the flat pattern, there is the sketch for the bend lines. And with the icon colored, it is set to show. And if you come over here and right click on that and set to hide, it should give you a message telling you that it's going to remove it. And also the bend notes will be removed. And if you say yes, all of that will disappear. Now, for the bend notes, when the bend notes are not showing, you're going to set that back in the drawing view. by selecting, making sure that the A flat pattern view is selected. Now the A indicates that this view has the annotations, and those annotations include the bin notes. That's what the A is for in front of that view. That view includes the annotations. So let's select on that view, and we'll come over here on the flat pattern, make sure that we have that. And again, we have to come over here and turn these back on, set that to show. And we toggle this on and off, and it'll bring the bin notes back. Now another thing with flat patterns is when people are trying to mirror the part, they want a opposite hand version or left or right hand version of this part. Now prior to 2015, when you would mirror a part using sheet metal, the new mirrored part would not include any sheet metal features. After you created the new mirrored part, you would have to go into your sheet metal tools and use Insert Bins tool. Using this, you would then recognize the bins that exist, and it would redefine that part as a sheet metal part. But now in 2015, there is a sheet metal information option under the options to transfer, and as soon as you mirror the part, that mirrored part automatically is a sheet metal. And there's no extra steps beyond mirroring. Let's take a look at that. Okay. So first I'm going to select a plane to mirror about. And then I'm going to go to Insert, Mirror Part. Now if you don't select a plane first, this mirror part is going to be grayed out. So you have to select that plane first. And make sure that sheet metal information is checked. And accept it. So this is just my template settings that it's using for my units. And you see that I have an opposite hand version of this, and it is automatically sheet metal. Has a flat pattern. I don't have to come up here and do any extra steps to do that. So that's new with 15. That's really nice. But that used to be a problem when you would do an opposite hand version. It wouldn't come in as a sheet metal. Now another thing that we see is when people are using the normal cut features, which is allowed, but you have to do this in a certain order. Once normal cut features are placed in the tree, the order in which they are in the tree will affect whether the part is recognized as a sheet metal part or not. If you create normal cut features after all of the sheet metal features are there, SOLIDWORKS will recognize that part as a sheet metal part. Now, if you go in and you start creating sheet metal parts, and then you do normal cut features, and then you do more sheet metal parts after some of the normal cut features, SOLIDWORKS will no longer recognize that part as a sheet metal. So you might have to reorder some of those features in your tree. Okay. Now this could cause problems when, for one instance, when you're trying to insert forming tools. If you have created any of the normal cut features before any of your sheet metal features, it won't recognize it as a sheet metal. You try to insert a forming tool and it will give you a message telling you that it is not recognized as a sheet metal part, and you will not be allowed to insert those forming tools. So you need to be careful with that. Now, speaking of forming tools are used in sheet metal parts, but be aware that they do not stretch the material the same as they do in real life. In SOLIDWORKS, when you add a forming tool, the thickness of the sheet metal remains the same, and in real life that's not what happens. When you use a forming tool and you bend that material, the material thickness thins out, but you're not going to get that effect in SOLIDWORKS. So you need to be careful when you do this. If you start trying to use mass properties or doing stress analysis, just remember that you're not going to get 100% precise readings on that because of this, because technically it will thin it out a bit, and SOLIDWORKS is not showing that. So one of their suggestions is that you might want to consider using the flat pattern rather than the form sheet for some of these functions. Okay, so be aware of that the forming tools do not change the material thickness when it stretches the material. Okay, that is going to be the end of our webinar today. I know it was short, but these are some of the more common things that we get calls on. In the future, we'll most likely be doing another webinar with some more advanced issues that we see with the sheet metal problems. I hope that you will join us for that in the future when we have one. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope that this was some useful information for everyone and you got something out of it.